Well, hello, and welcome to my cellar one more time. I don't know about the weather you're having, but we're having weather that we should have had 2 weeks ago when it was 74, and now, and it's just weird here. So, hope your weather's better than ours. Of course, certain parts of the country you could be catching hell. All right, let's go. I like the idea of surprising a party with a tentacle monster stretched out from the darkness just beyond reach. No body, just a long tentacle arm. Keeps the unknown detail up to players' own imagination. Yeah, that sounds like fun. I once did something like that where I had a section of wall that grew tentacles. And of course, they kept looking in the room and couldn't see anything that was causing the tentacles, and it was the wall here. And as soon as they pull their head back out, and so, I like keeping the suspense up so you don't know exactly. You can do the same things with you can achieve the same effect by lobbing rocks out of the darkness or things like that. I'm all for keeping a certain level of tension going. That's half the fun of the game. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing my North Texas shirt from 2019. Last year I went. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting this is backwards. And I'll be running some games for North Texas. 3 of them that I am sure of. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I'll be running the Wheel of Blame. I might be running one Sunday. I'm not sure. So think about that. Oh, and tomorrow I'm going to be on a podcast. Or no, Sunday I'm going to be on a podcast. I'm going to make a podcast called Wandering DMs. So if you know that. Anyway, speaking of scrolls, well, we weren't, but we are. How difficult do you think it should be to create a magical scroll? Also, if you want to run through True Dungeon at Gamehole Con with my family, I'll pay for your run. Well, thank you very much for the very kind offer. Um, Physically, I'm not into going through dark places or anything like that. Since my chemo, I have peripheral nerve damage in my feet, and if I can't see where I'm walking, I have a somewhat of a problem with that. But how difficult should it be to make a scroll? Well, this is something we've talked about several times. Gary and I talked about it. It would require a magical ink, a magically enchanted parchment or vellum or something like that. All the components that you would normally need to cast a spell, say, doubled or tripled, so that it can infuse into those characters that are on that scroll that, when uttered, cause the effect that you're looking for. I would make it very expensive. I would make it require a special quill, special ink, all those kind of things, because once you establish that, if you want to sit around and start writing scroll, this should also take some time, but that's pretty subjective, and that would be up to your DM, you as a DM or your DM. But yeah, you ought to be able to do it, because what are you doing? You're either producing an item that you can then trade for something of equal or greater value to another magic user, so you could then copy it into your spell book, and presumably the other magic user is motivated the same way, and then you have it forever and ever. And so it should have a lot of intrinsic value when you swap for it to put it into your book, and vice versa. My personal opinion. That's just what all right. Next comment. My favorite class to play. Listen carefully. My favorite class to play is the elf. What is yours? As I have iterated many times, in my opinion, race as class is inherently valueless. Playing it, okay, I'm going to be an elf. Elf is a class. So what do? Do you sit around and read self-help books about be the best elf you can be? How to be a better elf? Um, Rather, it should be your profession that determines your class, not your genetics. My opinion, I never agreed with racist class. I thought it was stupid. I don't care whose idea it was. I still would say it was a stupid idea. All right. So no, I don't have a class. Uh, my favorite class is probably Magic User. Um, okay, Tim. Probably an old question, but I wanted to ask if there was a reason why the dice set that D&D used is what it is. I've heard some say it was just what was around at the time, while others say it was a marketing ploy to sell more pieces of plastic. What's your story about why they came about? All right, as told to me by Gary, they were available to create all new uh, difference of probability or chance. I knew about polyhedral dice. I'd seen them in a school supply catalog, or I'd seen them in a class in school or in college. I knew about them. I didn't make the connection. Up to this point, board games were played with six-sided dice. Many, all games up to that point were played with six-sided dice, or especially manufactured die. Maybe I can't even think of one offhand. But everything was a six-sider. 1, 2, 3, 4 six-siders, which all produce a certain bell curve of probabilities. Prior to Gary adopting the polyhedra, Mike Carr is the only designer I'm aware of up to that point that had figured out a way to generate percentages using six-siders. And he did it for his game Fight in the Skies, also known as Dawn Patrol. You had to either have the chart there or memorize which numbers on which percentage. If there was a 35% chance of you striking the target, then any one of certain numbers of which there was a aggregate 35% chance, that's what you had to roll. And it worked. It was cumbersome, and like I said, you had to have the chart or memorize all the numbers. Percentage dice, keep in mind it was a D20, a D12, a D8, a D4, and a D6. Those all produce different curves. And of course, the D20 is, or however you want to look at it, it's a flat 5% increment. By using these probabilities and percentages now generated, you had much more variety, you had much more latitude. If there was essentially a 25% chance of something happening, rather than roll on a six-sider and 1/4 out of 6, you rolled a four-sider, boom, there you had it. With percentile dice, you could get the 5-degree or 5% increments, and in so enabling the designer to have such small increments infecting the dice one way or the other, up positive or negative, you could have for much more subtle design features. I'm attempting to learn a new game now called Black Seas. It was gifted to me, and they use D10s and D4s, and there's strictly 10%ers in tens instead of having the five variations. The 5% variations. So um, Gary knew the dice were there. They were also novel, but they were also chosen for their novelty as a way to show the other possibilities that existed for game design. Hey, look what you can do with all these cool dice. Look at the numbers you can generate. Look at the new probabilities you have. Because chainmail, for instance, was run with all sixes, and it was somewhat limited. This allowed more subtleties. Differentiates between the numbers. And it certainly wasn't to sell more because the things were damn hard to get a hold of. Getting a whole set of polyhedras and at first, we were to put into the games that had 20-siders. We were buying boxes of 5,000 dice at a time from Hong Kong that came in horribly flimsy boxes. They always managed to make it across the ocean into our building just before they disintegrated. I've probably told the story about the box that disintegrated at the top of the stairs, and we were still finding 20-siders years later in the basement where they'd all run down to. It certainly wasn't for our convenience that we used those dice. Hi, Tim. I was wondering how ability checks were handled back in the day at TSR. Rolling under the ability score on a D20, using D6s somehow. Well, if you're talking about ability checks with a capital A, like as in skills and abilities, we didn't do it. We applied whichever of the six core stats was the most apt for that situation. If you were trying to talk the pitchfork and torch arm villagers out of roasting you like capons on spits, then obviously you had the guy with the highest charisma. If somebody had to leap across the chasm to be able to get the bridge across so you didn't fall into the fiery pit below, the guy with the best agility. The guy with the highest smarts figured something out. The guy with the highest wisdom, well, wait a minute, that might not be a good idea. We didn't use skills and abilities. I don't like skills and abilities. If I'm playing in a campaign, everybody's the PC's innate skills and abilities seem to make themselves known. I don't use them at all in a convention setting. Have I seen Stranger Things, which has characters playing D&D? How do you feel about the depiction of D&D in films and TV shows? P.S. Have you seen Harmon Quest? If so, how do you rate the gameplay? All right. Many things there. Have I seen Stranger Things? Of course I have. How do I feel about the depiction of D&D in films and TV shows? Being an advocate of my gaming career of play it the way you want to. The only one that I've ever seen depicted that I thought was a bunch of was an enormous wagon load of horse shit was that Mazes and Monsters Abomination by Rona Jaffe or Rona Barrett or whoever the hell that was with Tom Hanks. And he's got to be sorry, looking back on it, that he took that job. Now, as a kid, when he got the role, I'm sure he was glad for the paycheck. Looking back on it now, it's got to be one of those things that he goes, oh. That was atrocious. I loved the way Parks and Recreation with dumbass go, hey, I win, which we all know that's not true. But with the Futurama with Gary in it, and hi, how are you? I'm fine. Rolling the dice. I think that's funny as hell. The way it was played on The Big Bang Theory and their fascination with games and the way they'd sit there and slam cards down, whether it was D&D or Magic or Carcassonne, Catan. You know, it was fine because if you were to look at a huge cross section of gamers, you'd find every kind of human being under the sun. Even surly people that you wonder, why do you bother? But they're still there playing games. I other than Mazes and Monsters, which was, so long ago, but I also disliked it so much because of the disservice it did to the hobby, to the game itself. It was just bullshit. Okay, back to the opposite upside down thing. Well, we talked about this last week. His intention was that magically everyone has normal gravity. Okay. That would remove the blood rushing to the head. But if it didn't, okay, you've got so many turns before your veins in your forehead start popping out. That's an interesting hurry up and get it going. So he's got an option one. Everybody's upside down. The incentive to win the battle before the blood rush blackout. Option two, as in one, but successful attackers blood pressure lowers a bit while victims increases. Option three, magic gravity is same for all, but distance between the floors constantly decreasing. Could be a crusher room. Possibility of joining forces until trap is solved. Yeah, okay, that all sounds like fun things to do. I didn't even project into having a magical gravity field, etc. I like simple, didn't think of it. That's all. I just thought of, wow, if you walk in and all of a sudden you're upside down, your vision's going to get blurry, and your head's going to swell up from excess blood, and your heart's going to get, you see what I'm going. Okay, I'm probably next one. You're probably old enough to remember Pogo. Yes, I am. I'm old enough to remember Pogo, reading it when I didn't understand it, and one day realizing, oh wow, this is some great satire stuff, and then understanding, getting it, so to speak. All right. What if I win the lottery tomorrow and hire you for $1 million to write the rules for a Pogo tabletop RPG? What type of system would you lean towards? What would be the most important hook for a Pogo RPG? What would an encounter entail? Pogo was very observational. The humor was observational. One of the greatest lines: "We have met the enemy, and he is us." There's a lot of wry, sarcastic observation going on there. I really would have to think a lot before figuring out how to make a game out of Pogo. I would probably have to make it silly, because you can't just sit around and make observations and make it into a game. Well, I don't know. For a minute there, I spun off towards Cards Against Humanity and wonder if I could go that direction, but that would not be so much fun. You could offer me $1 million, and I'd be honest with you and say I don't think there's a game there. I'd have to think about it though a long time if I'm going to turn down $1 million with honesty. All right, now here's a long one that kind of hops and skips all over and everything. The thrill of some kind of scavenging hunt for something like spell components and or recipes and or ritual instructions, reagents, ingredients, minor quests to find mount was kind of where I was going with the alternate level advancements, by encouraging players to write stories of their characters, civilian adventures or non-combat Combative level advancing lifestyles. Pieces to a puzzle with different art and PCs giving the characters clues can be fun. Okay, sure. I know of campaigns that have been going on for a long, long time where characters have married each other or married each other's sister or brother, or whatever. That kind of depth is admirable, and it shows a devotion to the minutia of this magical fantasy world that's been created by the group efforts of the people in the campaign, and that's all pretty cool. The old trope characters meet at a pub or bar to start adventure sounds kind of lame when the character's lifestyle is obviously about being ready for adventure and definitely not getting inebriated on alcohol or tempted by the patrons there very often. Well, you're taking that to an extreme. Not every public house had a hooker working in it. Not every public house allowed for drunken, crazed brawls that broke up the furniture and destroyed the glasswork and everything. Public houses were very often neat, orderly, kept orderly by the owner, took pride in their cooking in an effort to bring more custom through the door. So I don't. When I say they all meet in a bar, it's not some nasty thing with sawdust on the floor that smells of stale beer and puke. And where better to find gossip, to listen, than a place where people are in their cups. And so you sit around quietly on the side and you interact to whatever degree that you wish with the clientele, and you listen and you learn. There is no general store where you can go sit around the pot-bellied stove and listen for information. There could be if that's your bag, you can make it that way. And yeah, okay, it's easy. But I've done adventures all different ways. I've done them where you've been summoned. I've done it where there's been a public notice placed up there, and excuse me, my nose is beginning to itch. Public notice placed, and you have to undergo some sort of trial or test or present credentials or whatever. There's lots of ways to get the party together, and that's usually only once anyway. To begin your campaign, once adventurers have adventured with each other 2 or 3 times, they know what they're doing. They know when they can be there. Adventures don't place day. Given, okay, let's go do this and find that. There's always an interval between finding that and going to, oh, let's go over there and do this. There's an interval in there. It's not like you run from adventure to adventure. Depending upon how you feel about rest and recuperation and training and all that. All right, let's go on here. Pieces to a puzzle. All right. Why not design a public adventure, gymnasium, and health club with all the sorts of competitive sparring? Okay. That could be a place where people go to hire adventurers or find somebody to go on an adventure with them. Somebody more than just a horse holder or a pack carrier. Public library, bookstore. Okay. I mean, there's all kinds of level of detail you can go into. You can, for instance, you can abstract upkeep. Just say, okay, it's your fortune's ebbing away at a rate of so and so a day based on where you're staying, and whether or not where you're staying also provides food, how many meals a day, yada da da da. you can you can track that kind of stuff to whatever degree you wish. And in a long running campaign, that becomes important because it's part of the fabric of the campaign. If you're going to go play a pre-designed adventure, something I wrote, something Jim wrote, Chris, somebody, Ed, you're going to have a contrived beginning more than likely. However, that adventures has managed to, whatever justification they've made for you being there, it's not something in your campaign. Now, your DM can absorb it into the campaign and say, oh, it's over on this part of the continent, or whatever, and thereby make a much richer tapestry that he might be able to weave by himself. I used to do that a lot, especially with the early Judges Guild stuff. The Sunstone Caverns were a place where we adventured several times. That was all out of the the city state of the Invincible Overlord. That's it. Okay, on to something else. Playing is certainly much better than various addictions. Men get judged about a good thing. Where would it be more tolerant if he was a drinker? Well, if you want to make your character into a boozer or whatever, that's how you personally flesh it out. Otherwise, I'm not exactly sure where that one was going. Okay, here's an interesting one, and I'm only reading this because I'm gonna share a strong feeling of mine. R.E. In regard to dimwit characters and how half-orcs are brought into the world, I was just thinking maybe the perfect prank on annoying player characters with both low wisdom and low intelligence, especially if they're brawny, dumb jock guys like barbarians and fighters or maybe even paladins, would be for the characters to get shanghaied by an orc tribe and forced to mate with one woman, kind of like this funny scene from Queen for Fire? Quest for Fire. Oh yeah, that one. All right. I can't even read this because I don't go there. I wouldn't touch that with a silver spoon or your 10-foot pole. Again, I find the idea of half-orcs abhorrent, and I see no humor in this. I see no humor in forced sex, whether it's with people or animals. That's something I stay the hell away from and have always stayed the hell away from. Don't need it. I'm a little squeamish about it. It's getting late tonight. I'm going to need my glasses to get through this next one. Can't agree more on barbarians. In concept, ignoring all the goofy pulp tropes, a barbarian is just a specific way to play a fighter. My experience, though, a lot of players come to my games with certain expectations as to what kind of characters they want to play, often informed by later versions of D&D descended from AD&D with a dozen or more classes, though they aren't necessarily attached to particular mechanics, just the tropes associated with the classes. So even though I only actually have 3 different classes, fighter, magic user, or theurge, or aka cleric, I use a lot of subclasses that often are just minor modifications to the base class. So a player can pick to play a ranger or a bard or an assassin, but they're mostly all just playing fighters. As for the barbarian, I don't even think they were worth a whole subclass, and just had it be a okay. They weren't worthy of a whole subclass and should have just been a choice of background for a normal fighter or warrior. You start out poor and illiterate, and most can tell by your crude and savage demeanor. In exchange, you get a marginal bonus to camp out in the wilderness, but players mostly choose to play them just because they like the idea of being a barbarian, not for all the mechanical bells and whistles. Yeah, really, everything, in my opinion, is a descendant of the I make 4 classes. Now it's called the Rogue, and the other 3: Fighter, Magic User, and Clerical type person. Everything else is a variation, which is why I didn't think you needed a whole class for it. You want to say your backstory says you're a crusader and you got this real serious problem with evil, or whatever. That's fine. You play it that way, just like you play being a barbarian. How do you play being a barbarian? With your big brutish strength and all your hit points, you just blunder in and smack crap until you become, level 5th, level 6, and then you like being level 5, level 6, whatever, as you're working your way up, and you no longer run into crap, which I would imagine most initial barbarians became much smarter if they lived that long, and that would be a natural progression. All right, here we go back with doing away with race as a class. The old basic 1981 Moldvay went on to the Beckme series. Onto the Beckme series was Frank Menser's revision, pretty much had race as a class. Well, I didn't see that, and I don't care if it did. I don't care whose idea it was. I don't care whether Moldvay thought of it, or Menser thought of it, or Greenwood thought of it. I don't like it. That's all I've ever said. I don't care who said it. Just because one of them said it doesn't make it right. My personal feelings. Don't care who said it. Just because I said I didn't like it, don't like something, doesn't mean you shouldn't like something. Just because I said it, no. You have to weigh it. You have to assess it. And then you make your judgments. All right. Luckily, that's boycottable beyond all recognition with basic fantasy total freebies by Chris Gotterman and all the OSR freebies, such as the Sword and Wizardry that Matt Finch did. Words can't describe the joy of a midlife internet connection and feeling like I redeemed myself from everything that gotten thrown away by my mom in 1989. Overgrown kid on a free shopping spree in the toy store is fun. Yeah, I imagine it would be. See, there's a thing. There's a major difference between that I've observed. I'm not saying I believe I have observed a major difference between men and women. And that is that a lot of men will still go up and down the aisles in the toy store, in the toy aisles, just to see what's being made now. Some women might go up and down the dolly aisle, but not nearly as many as guys will to see. What's they need is G.I. Joe. What's there now? All right. Racial level limits are a necessity of game balance between player races. Considering the racial bonuses for demi-humans, why even play a human character if demi-humans have no restrictions? Based upon the experience table, single-class humans have diminishing returns over demi-human multi-class characters. Take a single 6-level human fighter with 100,000 experience points and a 6/6 elven fighter wizard with 50/50 1,000 experience points, for example. There's no argument that the elven character's capability and power far exceed the human. Now consider a triple-class demi-human, such as a fighter, magic user, thief, with 33,000 in each class, producing a 5th, 6th level. We have gone from 7 character levels to 12 and subsequently 16 before we even consider racial adjustments and abilities. Balance, in big capital letters, is the reasoning behind restricting demi-humans. And in reply to that, In certain systems, yes, the one could change the racial bonuses instead of limiting levels. Well, if you mean like instead of getting +3 looking at stuff underground, like say orbs or dwarves in your campaign, as they get higher, they can see less well by having fewer pluses. That's an interesting metric to try to apply. Well, here he uses night vision. The longevity of demihumans, therefore higher starting levels, maybe is a more reasonable explanation for any advantages they might have. Longer life equal higher skills. Just a thought. Not a bad thought, not a bad justification. The next reply was, I agree, most players run to demihumans because of the bonuses. You have to have balance somehow, and that's why you level them out. All right. This is a really long one. I'm going to synopsize it. You said you were once a public school history and science. No, I was a history and social. I'm a social studies, but I often subbed in science because I was good at it, and I taught geography too. Yes. So any of these, if so, in any of these fields of study, might suggest to your audience you still have curiosity about the unexplainable, unaccountable. Yes, I do, but I've never based a campaign on history's mysteries or something like that. Not to say that I can't have Atlantis be real, but I'm not going to write any adventures centering around Oak Island. Okay, I only inject so much real. There's great mythology. They're still trying to figure out what that calculating device was they found in a harbor somewhere over in Turkey or whatever. I might see something like that and go, oh, the mysterious advice of Mansakius the Poor has been located. Go get it for me and form an adventure around it. That might be fun. Let's see. Can I tell? All right, now I've got two. Basically, this individual also wanted to know. And by the way, god damn, I wish some of you would learn how to spell Segway. It's not Segway. That's a little thing you ride around on two wheels and look like a dork. Segway is Segue. That's how you segue into the next topic. The next topic being M.A.R. Barker and his world of Petal Throne. How did I know it? I had exceedingly little contact with Professor Barker. I was fortunate to go up to his home one time on a trip with Brian and Gary, and it's my belief that Dave Arneson was already holding a grudge because he thought I had the job he should have had, and I can only assume that he had poisoned Barker's mind because Barker didn't have any time for me whatsoever and wouldn't let me play in the demo game. Everybody else got to play it. I don't know. I don't care. The professor was a weird duck, exceedingly brilliant linguist, scholar. Definitely a weird duck. I know it's easy to say now. I never thought the Empire of the Petal Throne was going to be a viable product. Too foreign. When we were still trying to teach a foreign way to play games, role play. You couldn't pronounce the languages. You couldn't pronounce the monster names. You had to take a language lesson in Petal Throne to even play the game. I didn't think that would be very appealing beyond the beautiful maps and some interesting monsters like the Ahugya. And I was pretty right. It never did sell really well. It never took off. And it's still considered a very niche game. It's kind of a shame. But the professor created an entire world in a level of detail that very few have ever rivaled. All the races. Tolkien would be the next level up for creating an entire world. But we know about Tolkien's world because Tolkien wrote some good books with stories taking place in this world. Professor Barker never did. Professor Barker would have had a hard time doing it. He'd have had to put a glossary in the back of every book just telling you how to pronounce the weird stuff in there. I didn't see a great future for it, and in this case, I was pretty much right. Let's see, what's next? Oh, I saw a podcast concerning Gary's secret D&D rules, Gary's house rules, purporting to be notes taken from a talk that Gary gave at a Gen Con. Very vague on when this was, but he was pretty sure it was Gen Con. And many of the notes taken absolutely look like stuff Gary had done or would do as far as not playing rules as written. They made a few assumptions that I thought were possibly incorrect. If I ever get a copy of that page of notes, I'd be glad to talk about it sometime. But until that happens, there were certain things. Yeah, a lot of them could be about throwing away extra dice when it's dead. All right. When you hit 0 with Gary, you weren't necessarily dead. You were unconscious. Say you were a 3rd level character. When you got to -4 hit points, then you were dead. That certainly sounds like something Gary probably did. I think that's a lot of the things on there were things we did at Gary's table. So it's a little insight to the way it was, what it was like playing at Gary's table. I didn't have the luxury of doing that very much just for fun. We were usually playtesting. And playtesting, we had to do it pretty much rules as written because our first playtest, our first modules were designed for running an enormous tournament with over 400 people that signed up to play in it, and which was an astronomical number at the time and was an enormous sum of money. That's all I got this week. I'm hoping to make it to Game Hole. I understand, Game Hole's not a for-profit enterprise, and not having an event last year has hurt their finances, and I may not go back this year. I go to the cons, and I've always been upfront about this. I go to the cons that ask me to be a guest, and they give me a place to stay because I can't afford to go to 4 or 5 different cons. I have the time, not the money. So yeah, I go to the cons where I'm invited. If you're sitting somewhere that has a con that wants to shell out the bucks to bring me there and put me up, I'll run games at your con too. Okay. I'm hoping, that I really want to come back to Game Hall, but I completely understand that the finances aren't there this year. So here's hoping I see you. In the meantime, Please be cautious. My group, and we're getting back together next Wednesday, at least 4 of the 5 of us. Fifth guy's not so sure yet, simply because he has the most exposure every day in his job as a pharmacist. But we've all said, hey, man, I got a 8.5 foot long pool table. We can space around it. We can all wear masks. We're playing this Wednesday. Cannot wait. It's been over a year since we all got together to play games. I hope you are able to start doing this as well. But be careful when you do it. Don't be like some of these idiot states like Florida and Texas and Idaho who just, no more restrictions, and then their infections are starting to spike again and go up. So I encourage you, if you do, when you get back together playing face-to-face, be careful. In the meantime, get your shots. Wear your mask, because science says it's the best thing to do, not because it's my political outlook. Do the right things for science. Sneeze in the elbow, wash your hands, stay safe, and I hope to see you at a con in the near future. In the meantime, do Dada Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Tight with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.